Hello, and welcome to my channel. Today we are going to be talking about track labs that happened last weekend in Switzerland. And if you don't know what track labs is, it's basically an experimental track meet by World Athletics that tests out new events that have not been seen before and new rules and regulations that have not been seen before, to see how they affect the events, and they get a bunch of pretty high caliber athletes. I was actually surprised to recognize some of the names that they had. I think in the past, they've done similar things in the past, I think with a lot smaller names. They had some bigger names this time, which I think is important because you have to really think about how the highest caliber of athletes are going to be impacted by the changes you're making. Because World Athletics, basically, they control everything. They are evil overlords of track. And as a longtime track fan and track runner, I have a lot of opinions on the changes that they are looking to make and the things that they displayed in this meet. So we are going to get into it. This is the order of events. I just have it here because I want to stay on track, which is not something I'm very good at. But let's go in order. First of all, this broadcast was really weird. It is available on YouTube. It's the Fribourg Track Lab from Switzerland. The broadcast is really weird because it's mainly in English, but all of the explanations are in Swiss with English translation, and there's also parts that are only in Swiss. At least I assume they're in Swiss. I don't speak Swiss. All I know is they're not in any language that I have any basis in. So that was a little weird, but it's fine. We get through it, and most of it was in English, so I'm not really complaining. I would highly recommend going and watching it. It's about 2 hours long, and it's just good to see for yourself, but I'm going to talk about my opinions here. So first I want to talk about I'm just going to group these all in together. It's the women's 100-meter hurdles, the men's 200 meters, the women's 800 meters, and the men's 400 meters. And the only changes they made to these is that instead of having the 0.1 as the legal reaction time, they had 0.0 as the legal reaction time, which means you will not be considered having a false start unless you start before the gun actually goes off. And I love this change. I am a false start crier. I will cry if someone false starts, especially in a final. And also, in my opinion, false starts don't just mess up the athlete that has the false start, they mess up all of the athletes, and this change could potentially reduce the amount of false starts we have by so much, which I think is so great because there has to be some sort of data on this. I couldn't find any, but there has to be data. I think that they do run slower after having a false start. Like, the times are slower, which is fine, but I like to see fast times. I like to see Olympic records and meeting records and world records and personal bests. And so I think having less false starts is potentially a great thing for that. Plus, obviously, no one likes it when it's a global final, the biggest moment of someone's life, and they false start. It's heartbreaking. It's absolutely heartbreaking. I was just watching last night Paralympic, I think it was T42 or T32, 200 meters from back in Rio 2016, and like the home athlete false started. It was painful to watch. I'm not even going to get into the whole aspect of that and how the blind athletes have the same reaction time as the normal athletes, even though I think that it's very different with how they interact with the gun and the starting line in general. I'm not even going to get into that. The point is, it was sad to watch, even now, 8 years later. So if that could potentially not be a thing anymore, I am all for that. I don't actually think it affected the results. I couldn't find. They said that the times would be ratified as long as the reaction times were considered legal, which I don't know how I feel about that, because like there could have been false starts as of the rules of today, but they wouldn't have been a false start. And like I said, I think false starts do have an impact on time, but whatever. I don't actually think it matters that terribly much. It's fine. But yeah. So I haven't seen anywhere like if any times were not ratified, like what times were ratified. I tried to find it, I couldn't. So I guess we'll never know. I wish that they had some sort of like pop-up or statistic to show us if any of them started faster than that, but I just didn't see one. But I do think that that's overall a positive change and a good change. The sport is evolving, reaction times are evolving, and I think that we also need to evolve the rules with it. It just makes sense. Next is the mixed pole vault. So the change to this wasn't really that it was mixed. That wasn't the point. The point was that they were using the like effective jump height and not the normal jump height. So they put the bar at 4 meters and they were just having them jump and trying to get as high as they could, and then they're using their like replay technology to see how high they actually jumped and going off of that for placement and things like that. I used to be pole vaulter. I was not a very good pole vaulter, I will admit. But if we're talking about things like the hammer throw and the javelin, I have no clue how that works in any sense. I have a sense of how pole vault works. And I can say, with my sense of how pole vault works, and just as a longtime track and field fan, this change sucks. And I will cry if they implement this like on a wider scale, because this is stupid. It's not as good for crowd engagement. It just isn't, and it takes away the magic. When Mondo cleared that world record in Paris, I was watching it live. That was magical. I have my reaction. I'm not gonna post it because I'm pretty sure I'm just wearing a sports bra and nothing else. But I have my reaction on video, and it's like a magical moment. And it's like, as a track fan, that's what you live for. You live for those special moments where a world record gets broken on the final attempt. And that takes so much of it away. So basically what they did is you just have like attempts like you do in like in the throwing events. You have like a set amount of times that you get to go. And I just don't like it. It's just bad. It's not good for the spectators. It was clear that the jumpers had no idea how to manage this because all of them cleared so far under what they can normally comfortably clear. I don't remember who it was, but there were so many women who are 470 jumpers. They can jump 470 basically every day of the year, and they cleared like 445. Like, not like. And yes, like they would get used to it, but I think it's just, you're changing everything about the sport. And I also saw, I was listening to the Sidious Mag episode about this, and they were talking about how like this is kind of already how it is in sports, like the throws and things, and how high jump and pole vault are just like different from the jumps and the throws, and the jumps and the throws already just use this system, so it makes sense for pole vault and maybe high jump to use this system as well. And I just disagree because they're not the same, and also because the sports have evolved being a certain way. And you know what this really reminds me of? This really reminds me of the whole debate that happened with people who obviously don't know track very well on every platform after Noah Lyles came out on top in the men's 100 final. And they all said, why don't we measure by feet instead of torso? We don't measure by feet instead of torso because that was decided for a lot of reasons that I'm not going to get into. I'm not going to talk about that. I'm going to talk about now, this is how the sport is, and it's an essential part of the skill that makes the sport. Because track events are not just running, and field events are not just the bare bones of that event. There are little nuances, little things you have to get used to, and I feel like this takes away so much of that, and so much of the magic. It's just bad. It just is, and I hope to God we do not see this again. That is that. Anyways, next we hit the women's long jump. The change they made for this one is, if you have been watching the Paralympics, this change will be very familiar to you because they had a jump zone. It was 40 centimeter jump zone, and they measure the jump. They measure the effective jump. I don't know why track and field is so hung up on effective. Every time they use the word effective, all I can think about is you are taking away an essential skill, and as essential part of the skill that the sport is built on. I'm not a long jumper. When I signed up for track, I told my coach I would do any event as long as it did not involve a sand pit. My sensory issues cannot. But it's not an essential part of learning to be a long jumper or a triple jumper is learning how to handle the board, learning how to, get off the board, learning how to do legal jumps. And obviously that's something that could evolve and change over time if they made a rule change like this. But it is taking away kind of an essential component of the sport and part of the skill of the sport. And I think it could lead to longer jumps, but I also do think it takes some of that magic away, because when you're using more technology to enhance the way you measure things, that is fine. But you are taking away, in some of these instances, and the exact same thing as pole vault, you are taking away a big part of that instant knowledge by the crowd that was a big jump, that was a great jump. Because even though you don't have an instant measurement in the throws or in the long jump or in the triple jump, you can look at a jump visually and see that was a good jump or that was a bad jump. You can look at a throw visually and see that was a good throw or that was a bad throw. And I think that just takes so much of it away. And also, the high jump took so long. It was going on like the entirety of this 2-hour recording. Basically all throughout, I said high jump, didn't I? Basically all throughout the long jump was going on. It took so long. And I think it was also with this meet in particular because all the scores took a really long time. Like, even in, the men's 200, the scores took a weirdly long time to, come up, which doesn't make any sense because, it's a 200. You know how to score 200. I promise you. You're World Athletics. So I don't know if it's just this meet, but they took so long. And I was just like, this is not, because the crowd was just waiting. And the next person would be going and you didn't even know the mark yet. And I'm sorry, that is just ridiculous. No. Okay? Moving on to the men's javelin. The change they made to this, they made 2 changes, I believe. The first change was that there were little flags. They put up, they weren't that little. They were big flags, which I'll get to. They put up flags to show where everyone had thrown. And the second change was they would only measure a throw if the throw was longer than the previous best throw by that person. And I'm going to talk about these both individually. First, the flag thing. I think this is good. Unlike the changes they made in the long jump and the pole vault, I think this is good for visual interest and good to have a gauge, have a visual representation of where the different competitors are as the competition goes along. That being said, I think they need to figure their shit out because the flags they were using were like the corner flags I used to have when I played AYSO. And someone is going to hit that with the javelin and it's going to be a problem because that's going to affect how long their throw is. So that needs to be figured out for sure, because that is not going to work. But if they can have maybe the little country flags or whatever, something corresponding to the athlete, that are smaller and not going to interfere, I'm all for that change. On the topic of not measuring the throws unless they're the longest throw, again, I am not a thrower. I have never been a thrower. I'm a distance runner. I have noodle arms. So I can't throw. But I feel like it's just not a great change. They want it to go by faster, that's the goal, but I have a couple concerns with this. First of all, what if 2 people tie? Are you gonna have a throw off? Which I know that's the same joke that Sidious Mag made, but I was thinking the same thing. so. I don't really know what they're gonna do with that. Also, just like, I'm trying to compare it to my experience in pole vault because that's really the only field event I have a lot of experience in. In pole vault, like, even if you don't clear a bar, like, knowing where you are or having a recording of what you did is important because that helps you analyze what you can do better. And I feel like knowing where you're at a throw is important in the same way. Like, to know where you are, to know maybe where you need to make improvements, it's important to know that distance. Also, I don't know, you just kind of lose some of the fun. And you lose some of the absolute domination that people like the American throwing squads or the Canadian throwing squads, you lose some of the domination that they have in their own throwing events. So, I don't know, it's tough. And I also, at the end of this video, I am going to talk about changes that I think should be made to some of these events. So stick around for that. But I don't know how I feel about that one. I don't like it very much. And last but not least, they wrapped everything up with the steeple mile. Now, I liked this event. I liked the idea of this event in general. However, I have some concerns. The first concern is literally a month ago, we witnessed a guy almost die because he went too fast into a steeple and it like obliterated him. He was like dead on the track. And he's good now, and I am glad he's good now, but like we were watching that live and it was scary. And I feel like that's what you get when you do a steeple event that fast. And I think that yes, competition can evolve. If this is going to be a practiced event, they will get used to the speed, but I think it is definitely significantly dangerous. And I feel like we've been through this with hurdles, and that's why we made the little knocky over thing on hurdles, because okay, I also do 400 hurdles and I hit hurdles, and if I hit a hurdle and it was like a steeple barrier, I'd be dead. That's why we have the hurdles knock forward so you don't die. And I feel like steeple obviously doesn't have that, and I think that's a real concern in the shorter races when they're going so much faster. Also, I am all for new track events. I'm all for obscure track events. I love to watch a race get ran that is not in the common breakdown of events that we see at every meet. I like to see new and different events come out. But I think if we are thinking about implementing new events on a world athletics level, I want to see events that allow different people to shine and to be great at them. And I think we need to figure out, is this going to be an event that brings people who do the 3,000 steeple but have more speed, that brings them to an Olympic level or a world championship level, and they weren't already there in the 3,000 because they don't have the endurance for it? Is that going to bring those people into conversations for these big events? Or is this going to be an event where 3,000 steeplers who are already the top steeplers in the world just have another event to run? Because I also am all for more races, and I feel like this is also a conversation in distance. Because they always want to add more distance. Well, not they. The community, I think, has a lot of want to add more distance events, and I love that. I love to watch distance races, but I also think if you're gonna have a new distance event, you want it to be one that's going to bring more people into the Olympics, and is not just going to be the fourth event that Safan Hassan runs. Because I love Safan Hassan, and I am a multi-event runner, and I am a person who will run 4x8 and then 1,500 and then 3,000 and 400 hurdles in one meet. Like, I am that person, but I think on such a large scale, I would rather see more people than the same people doing 5 different events. Just my opinion. So I think that the steeple mile could potentially be amazing, and it could potentially just be we see the same steeplers return for another event. So we just kind of have to weigh the pros and cons of that, because I also think that if we add more and more and the same people are coming back for more and more events in these big meets, the times are going to get slower, and the races are going to get less interesting, and I just think that that's a function of it, unfortunately. So that is what I think of the changes. Now I want to discuss some things that I think would be really great changes to come to track and field, or great events for World Athletics to implement. So let's move on to that and finish this off on a bit of a lighter note. The first one is the SMR and the DMR. Now these are not even really, I think they're run most commonly at a collegiate level. Every year me and my team go to one relay meet and we run DMR and SMR. If you don't know, DMR is distance medley relay, SMR is sprint medley relay, and I cannot tell you off the top of my head what the exact legs are, but they are interesting events, they are fun events. I love to watch the handoffs for those events, and I think relays on a world stage are some of the most interesting events you can watch, because there's so many variables and there's so much chance for something unexpected to happen, for an unexpected comeback, an unexpected loss, an unexpected victory, and I think that that would be really special in a mixed format. So I think that would be amazing and so cool to see. Like, imagine getting to watch like Nikki Hiltz and Elle St. Pierre like run, like hand off to each other, run together like in a relay. Like, I feel like that would be amazing. Also, I think Nikki Hiltz at the 1200 would be something incredible. Like, I genuinely do. I think she would be so good on that leg, and I want to see it, and I want to see it soon, because I want to watch Nikki Hiltz run 1200 in the DMR, because I think she would be so damn good at it. But anyways, I think those would be just great additions. I also think just like, it's hard because, like I said, it's hard to know if you're gonna bring a new skill set into the Olympics, or if you're just going to end up with the same people doing more events. So it's kind of hard to know like what else. I would also like to see more mixed relays, mixed events, which I know is controversial, but I loved watching the mixed triathlon relay. Speaking of which, that is an underrated event. The triathlon relay was so good. Like, that was genuinely one of the best events I watched all Olympics. That was just such a fun event to watch, and that was so cool. Like, I loved it. I have dabbled in triathlons myself. I don't normally watch them like on a super regular basis like I do with the track events and marathons, but that was such a fun thing to watch. And I know mixed 4x4 has had some discussion about it, but I really think it's great. I think it's great, and I hope we get to keep it, because I know there's been a lot of I think it's been more in the US with like high school and college and stuff. But I really do hope that that is here to stay, because it is such a great event, and 4x400 in general is such a great event. But yeah, there are a lot of things, you know, that I think could be interesting additions. And rule-wise, obviously I really am wanting to have change as far as the false start rule. They can do one of two things with that. They can do like they did at the track labs and decrease the reaction time, or they could just be a little more lenient. Like, I'm not saying 3 strikes and you're out, but like maybe 2. Like, give them 1 false start, like, because if you're in a global final, the whole world is watching you. Like, it's gonna be a little stressful. It's gonna be a little stressful. And I feel like they could just do a better job at, I don't know, they could do a better job at making it so that we don't see one of the top contenders walk off. Which isn't something that's happened a whole lot, but it has happened. And when it does happen, it's always just a what if. And I think it's bad for the competitive spirit too, because, you know, you want to beat your rivals. You want to beat people at their best. And I feel like when there's false starts involved, like, that just can't happen. And it's unfortunate. But yeah, so those are my thoughts on track labs and some things that I hope they bring in very soon to track and field. And yeah, thank you guys so much for watching, and I will see you later.